All right, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling something, well, something pretty big. We're diving into one of the most profound and, let's be honest, mysterious concepts in all of Buddhism, the Dharmakāya. You know, it's this idea of ultimate reality that always feels like it's just out of reach. So, what do you say we try to bring it into focus together? And look, the challenge is real. We're not making this up. Even a foundational text like the Lotus Sutra straight up admits this concept is difficult to believe and hard to understand. So if you've ever felt kind of lost trying to figure this out, hey, you're in very good company. Let's think of this as our shared expedition to unpack this mystery, one piece at a time. So where do we even begin? Well, the first and most important thing we have to do is make a mental shift. We've got to stop thinking of Dharmakāya as a thing or some kind of person. The best way to wrap your head around this, think of Dharmakāya as a verb, not a noun. It's a process. It's this formless, creative energy that's just buzzing underneath everything. The source text calls it reality as activity, which is a perfect description. This isn't a place you can visit or a god you can pray to. Nope, it's the continuous, dynamic unfolding of existence itself.
Okay, so if it's totally formless, how in the world can we get a handle on it? Well, our first big clue comes from a framework called the Trikāya, which means the three bodies of the Buddha. Think of this as our map for seeing how the formless actually expresses itself in our tangible world.
So the Trikāya describes three different functions of one single unified reality. It all starts with Dharmakāya, that formless truth we were just talking about. Then that expresses itself through Saṃbhogakāya, which is like the rewarding spiritual connection we feel to that truth. And finally, it all shows up as Nirmāṇakāya, an embodied physical form we can actually interact with, like a teacher, a sacred book, or even just the path you're walking on. They're not separate things, but a continuous flow from the infinite right down to the here and now.
Now, to help make sense of this, it's kind of cool to look at a parallel in the Christian Trinity. Dharmakāya is like the source, the unknowable Father. Nirmāṇakāya is the manifestation in the world, just like the Son. And Saṃbhogakāya is that spiritual connection, a lot like the Holy Spirit. It's a really helpful comparison just to get the basic structure.
But, and this is a really important but, that parallel only goes so far. The Buddhist Trikāya is all about three interconnected functions of a single process. The Christian Trinity, on the other hand, describes three co-eternal persons within one God. So, while the structure looks similar, the core philosophy underneath is actually very, very different.
And this brings us to one of the biggest roadblocks in our investigation, the words themselves. I mean, we're dealing with ancient ideas that have been filtered through thousands of years of different languages and cultures.
Just how big of a problem are we talking about here? Well, get this. The source material points out that there are up to 18 potential points of failure when you try to translate these ancient texts into modern English. 18! That number is just staggering when you think about it. We're talking about everything from the basic challenge of one language to another, to how words just naturally change their meaning over centuries, and of course the unavoidable biases that every single translator brings to the table.
And this is a perfect illustration of what language drift actually looks like. In modern English, the man saw the woman. Simple, right? But rewind back to Old English and you get Seman Geseth Tha Weef. It's practically a different language. This just goes to show you why trying to take ancient text literally, word for word, is so incredibly risky. The meaning can shift completely.
Exactly. And as the scholar Paul Swanson points out, there's often no single correct translation. A version made for academics might be super precise, while one for you and me might take more liberties to capture the spirit of the text. And you know what? Both can be right in their own way, depending on who they're for. So yeah, language is a really slippery tool when we're dealing with this stuff.
So, if words are failing us and creating these false divides, how can we possibly get a grip on ultimate reality? Well, this is where we need a breakthrough in how we think. We need to move beyond simple black and white opposites.
This question really is the heart of the matter, isn't it? If the tools we normally use, our words, are flawed, then we need a brand new tool, one that allows for nuance and can hold two seemingly contradictory ideas at the same time.
And here it is. This is that tool, coming to us from the 6th century philosopher Zhiyi. His threefold truth is just brilliant. First, he says all things are empty of a fixed separate identity. Second, he says they still exist provisionally. You know, a table is still a table. But the third truth, the middle way, that's the real breakthrough. These two ideas aren't in conflict. Emptiness and existence are two sides of the same coin, a single, unified reality. Well, let's just put these two views side by side. Our normal, everyday mind tends to think in dualities. Things are either real or they're empty. It's either self or non-self. But the middle way says, nope, it's not that simple. It sees them as polarities. Things are both real and empty. You can't have light without dark, right? They actually define each other. It's a huge shift from an either-or worldview to a much more inclusive both-and perspective.
So what does all this high-minded philosophy actually mean for us, in our daily lives? Well, the resolution is all about finding this profound truth right here, in our ordinary, everyday experiences. Thich Nhat Hanh connects this non-dual way of thinking directly to our hearts. He says happiness and suffering aren't enemies in a war where one has to win. They're interconnected. You literally can't have one without the other. This perspective doesn't ask us to run from suffering, but to turn toward it, to embrace it, to see it as part of the whole beautiful, messy picture.
And in that same spirit, the 13th century monk Nichiren gives this amazing advice. Just fully engage with life, exactly as it is. Don't push away the suffering or desperately cling to the joy. Just see them both as facts of life and keep moving forward on your path. It's this incredible, radical acceptance of reality in all its fullness.
And this famous Zen quote just captures the entire journey perfectly. You start with a simple view of the world. Mountains are mountains. Then, as you dive deep into these concepts, everything kind of dissolves into this idea of emptiness. Mountains are not mountains. But the final stage of insight isn't about floating in some abstract void. It's about coming back to the world, but with totally new eyes, seeing with this profound clarity that mountains are, once again, mountains. So, the question this leaves us with is, can we learn to see the mountains in our own lives in that same incredible way?